I never thought my story would start with a stroller, but it did. It was dark blue, with small white ships sailing on the fabric. The boy inside was sleeping, his lips slightly parted, like a child who doesn't know a worry in the world. She, it seemed, didn't either, not until she saw me. Maria. She didn't notice me right away. She was standing at the juice counter, ordering something with mango. I heard her say, "Extra mango, please," as if she hadn't screamed at me 2 years ago for buying the wrong bread. I was standing behind a row of massage chairs, clutching a stupid grocery bag. I was frozen. I should have just left, but I stood there like a deer in headlights, staring at the eyes of my ex-wife. Then it happened. She turned her head, calmly at first, and then her eyes met mine. Everything changed. I would like to describe it. How her lips froze, how the color drained from her face, so fast that I thought she might faint. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I felt like one. My jacket was wet from the rain. I hadn't shaved in a week, and she looked like a magazine icon. Perfectly styled hair, a big sweater, a smile that had just been genuine and now turned into panic. I hadn't seen her in 735 days. Yes, I counted. And here she was, with a child she had with him. She said something, but I couldn't hear. A ringing in my ears, maybe it was my name or just a sob, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. What is he doing here? I wanted to laugh. What was I doing? This small used to be our refuge on rainy days. I remember the corner where she kissed me between the escalators, whispering, "Promise we'll never fall apart." She broke that promise on a Wednesday afternoon. There were no texts, no calls. She just disappeared. She left behind a house with 2 toothbrushes in a cup, a wedding ring on the coffee table, and a voicemail that started with, "Please don't be mad," and ended with, "I'm not coming back." And here she was, alive, thriving, with his child. I didn't get closer. Not yet. I watched her take the juice, gently rocking the stroller, nervously looking around as if I would disappear if I blinked. But I didn't. I took a step forward. She saw me move, and her body tensed as if I had pulled out a weapon. The child stirred. The stroller creaked as she backed away an inch. My voice broke when I finally spoke. Not a clever comeback or a sharp word, but just one question, quiet and even. "Is that his child?" I nodded slightly at the stroller, not trusting myself to say his name, Dimitro. Even now, those syllables were bitter. She barely nodded, as if afraid to move her head anymore. I let out a kind of laugh. It wasn't a real laugh, but something inside me that cracked and burst out. A couple walking by looked back. Maria flinched slightly in her sweater, clearly wishing the floor would open up and swallow her. "Too loud, right?" I said, my voice echoing off the walls. "You did it. You actually built a family with him." I looked at the child again. He had her eyes, big and blue, and a little too smart. I was just a rehearsal, right? "Please don't," she said finally. Her voice was thin, worn, like an apology that had aged poorly. She still hadn't said my name. Not Alexander. Not even you. Just don't. As if I was a threat, or worse, an echo. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something small and pointless. Instead, I just looked at her and asked, "Why did you do it? Just leave. No goodbye. No warning. You didn't even tell me in person." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked genuinely stunned. I had imagined this moment so many times. In the shower, in traffic jams, lying awake on an air mattress. I had written thousands of perfect lines, but none of them prepared me for this awkward, suffocating silence. My chest hurt. I realized I hadn't breathed in almost 20 seconds. "I didn't think you would let me go," she finally whispered. She waved her hand vaguely, as if I were a bad habit she had gotten rid of. I wanted to say something sharp, something final, but all that came out was a pathetic whisper, "I was your husband." And she flinched. That word, husband, hit her like a slap. She looked down again, her hand automatically rocking the stroller. The child began to fuss, not crying yet, just fidgeting. "I would have done anything for you," I said. "I stayed when you fell into depression. I cleaned your mom's garage when no one else would. I helped you prepare for job interviews, even when you were already texting him." That made her eyes rise. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Because I remember that night you came home smelling of his cologne. I asked if it was a new shampoo. You said it was lavender, and you rolled your eyes as if I was crazy. I didn't want to hurt you." "You still did," she said sharply. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but of course she didn't. Maria always knew how to keep her composure in public, and I was the guy who cried in the parking lot because the store didn't have the orange cough drops she liked. I was the guy who begged her to come back in voicemail number 17 while she was already living with him. And here I am, standing in a mall, holding a bag with a microwave I don't even need, talking to a woman who once said forever in her sleep while her new child tries to put a plastic giraffe in his mouth. And then she said the worst thing she could. "You look different." That's all. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "You didn't deserve this," but just different, as if I was a haircut or furniture rearrangement. I wanted to disappear, and I did something I hadn't planned. I turned and walked away, not dramatically, not with some epic line or a middle finger in the air. I just left, bag in hand, shoulders slumped. I walked past the candle store, past the bagel stand, through the automatic doors into the gray, rainy drizzle. And when they closed behind me, I realized something strange. For the first time since the day she left, she was watching me go. I thought this was the end. I thought I would just walk away and the glass doors would close behind me like a curtain after a humiliating performance. I didn't expect anything else from her. I certainly didn't expect the sound of quick steps splashing in puddles behind me. "Alexander, wait!" It was the first time she had said my name in over 2 years. I froze under the awning of the mall, clutching the bag as if it could hold me to the ground. I didn't turn around. She caught up to me, out of breath, one hand shielding her eyes from the rain, the other holding her sweater to her chest. The stroller, thank God, was left inside. I guess she left it with one of the vendors, or maybe she didn't care. I don't know. I couldn't stop looking at the parking lot, at the gray sky above it, at the thin wisp of steam rising from the asphalt. She stood next to me for a few seconds, her breathing the only sound between us. "You didn't look well," she said softly, as if that made her the hero of this scene, as if following me out into the rain meant more than 2 years of nothing. "You wanted to check on me?" I finally said, turning around, "after you erased me from your life like I was a mistake?" "I didn't do that," she whispered. "You ignored me, Maria." "I left a letter. You left a document with bullet points." She flinched again. I almost felt sorry. Almost. Her hair was wet, mascara slightly smeared under one eye. For a moment, she didn't look like the perfect woman from Instagram, but like someone who had been caught trying to remember everything she had tried to forget. And I realized that maybe she wasn't here for me. Maybe she was here for her own guilt. "I couldn't look you in the face," she said, finally, her voice almost lost in the wind. you would have talked me out of it." That hit harder than I expected. "Damn right I would have," I said, my voice cracking. "Because I believed in us. Because I thought you were just tired or confused. I didn't think you were building a whole other life with someone who drinks coffee from a can." She laughed. A real, small laugh. It made me sick. "You still do that," she said, wiping under her eye. "Do what?" "You make jokes when you're in pain." And just like that, I hated her again. Not in a dramatic movie way, but quieter. As if I hated someone for knowing me too well after they had stopped deserving it. I turned back to the parking lot, the wind whipping rain into my face. My jacket was soaked through. "Why did you really come out here?" I asked, not looking at her. "Did you want to make sure I wasn't going to jump in front of a car? Or just to check if I was still wearing my pathetic shoes?" At first, she didn't answer. I almost thought she would finally leave, but then she said quietly, "I had a dream last month. You were standing at the end of a pier. You didn't look at me. You just walked into the lake and disappeared. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe." I didn't know what to say. For a few seconds, I just stood there, blinking to wash away the rain, unsure if the wetness on my cheeks was just the weather or something else. "Why do you care now?" I asked. "Because you mattered. You still do, just not in the way you want." It was worse than a slap, worse than the letter, worse than every silence she had given me for the past 735 days. I finally looked at her. "Well, Maria," I said quietly, "you don't get to decide how much I matter anymore." And then I left. This time, she didn't follow me. I could feel it in the air. A shift, a resignation. Maybe she finally understood that you can't come back after you've surgically cut someone out of your life. You can't mourn something you slowly killed. I slowly made my way to the car, put the microwave bag on the passenger seat, and got behind the wheel, my hands trembling. In the mirror, I could still see her, standing in the rain, but she wasn't moving. She was just watching me drive away. I thought that was the end. Final scene, curtain dropped. She watches me from under that awning as I drive away with the saddest microwave in the country in the passenger seat. But this story refused to end where I needed it to. I found out 3 days later, when I got a letter. No return address, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper stuffed into a torn greeting card wrapping. It had cartoon raccoons on it. The letter looked like it was written in a hurry, the pen barely keeping up with the thoughts. But the handwriting was familiar, slanted, clear, Maria's. And at the top, above the first sentence, were 5 words I never wanted to read. "You don't know the half of it." I stared at those words for a long time, sitting on my unmade bed. The letter was heavy in my hand. The microwave was still unopened. I hadn't eaten anything but dry cereal since I was at the mall. And now she was sending me cryptic notes, as if it were a quest or a trap. The first line, "Dimitro was never meant to be permanent." My stomach clenched. What was that supposed to mean? An affair? A replacement? The father of her child was a temporary fling? She continued, writing that she hadn't wanted to get pregnant, and that Dimitro had been pressuring her about having a child. That after the boy was born, everything went wrong. His charm, his laughter, his late-night fun, it all disappeared when real life started. She told me how he had changed, how he started drinking more, how he stopped listening to her, how he disappeared for 2 days once and came back with a black eye and no explanation. And then there was the part that made me sit up straight. "I never told anyone this, but when I left you, I was already 3 months pregnant, and I wasn't sure if it was his child. My hands started shaking so hard that the paper rustled. I had to put it down and walk away. I paced the apartment like a trapped animal. 3 months? That meant there was a real chance. No, 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 this can't be. I went back to the letter. Dimitro didn't ask questions when I told him. He wanted the idea of a child more than the truth. He said if we didn't know for sure, we would just say it was his. And I was too embarrassed to stop him. I wanted to bury it. I convinced myself it was his. And maybe it is, but I don't know. And now I can't stop thinking. I dropped the letter, sat on the floor, and stared at the refrigerator. My mind was buzzing with fragmented thoughts, none of which were helpful. I remembered the boy, his eyes, the same deep blue I saw in the mirror when I looked at myself. This was no longer just a meeting at the mall. It wasn't just about her leaving me and replacing me with a guy in a sweater. It was about a child, and maybe, just maybe, my child. I picked up the letter again. The rest was just a bunch of regrets, guilt, something about how she sometimes thinks about what would have happened if she had told me sooner. The ending. I'm not asking for anything, I just thought you deserved to know. Deserved to know? I wanted to scream. I deserved a lot more than this torn confession shoved into a card with raccoons. But I still couldn't stop thinking about it. That boy, that stroller, that smile, those eyes. What if I had just walked past my son? What if Maria didn't just leave me, but took my child with her? I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. I sat on the edge of the bed in the same clothes I had worn to the mall, rereading her letter until the words lost their meaning. He could be yours. That line was spinning in my head, like a song I didn't ask for. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was something much deeper. I may have lost a child I didn't even know I had. And what was worse, he could have been sleeping under another man's roof for the past 2 years, calling him daddy. When the sun came up, I was already pacing the hallway like a madman. I pulled out my old laptop, the one with food crumbs under the keys and stickers from when Maria wanted to start a blog, and opened a new tab. Paternity test without mother's consent. This search led me down a dark rabbit hole, filled with forums where men like me were ghost dads, maybe dads, ex-husbands buried under someone else's lies. Most of them said the same thing. If you don't have legal rights, don't expect cooperation and don't expect the truth. But I wasn't looking for cooperation. I was looking for closure. I hadn't spoken to Maria since I got the letter. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask her how long she had planned to hide this information. Was she going to wait until he was 18 or just never tell me? But deep down, I knew why she had sent the letter. It wasn't for me. It was to clear her conscience without having to face the consequences. I opened my phone, scrolled through old messages until I found the number I once knew by heart. Her number. I hadn't dialed it since the divorce, but now my finger hovered over the button. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't trust how mine would sound. So I sent one message. We need to talk. Face to face. Please don't bring him. I watched the typing bubble appear and disappear, then nothing. No response. I waited 5 minutes, 10. I threw the phone on the couch and covered my face with my hands. It rang 20 minutes later. Her voice was quiet, even, as if she was trying not to wake someone up. I'll meet you, she said, tomorrow, but only for 10 minutes. It won't change anything. But it had already changed everything. The next day, we met on a bench in a park, not far from the neighborhood where we once lived, neutral territory. She was wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. She looked tired, her hair was a mess, and there was a stain on her sleeve. It was the first time in years she had looked imperfect, and oddly, it made her real again. I got straight to the point. I want a test. At first, she didn't answer. She just started pulling a thread from her sweater and said, I knew you would say that. She exhaled. What do you want me to do, Alexander?
Just take him to a lab and tell Dimitro, surprise, the child might not be yours? Dimitro doesn't matter. I do. This isn't fair. None of this is fair. I spent 2 years grieving a woman who didn't even bury me properly, and now you're telling me I might have missed the first steps, the first words of my own son? Stop. Why? Because it hurts? Good. She turned away, her hand trembling slightly, and I could tell she wanted to cry, but again, she didn't. I always hated that ability of hers to block everything out. Blink once, smile tightly, and pretend the ground wasn't crumbling beneath her feet. I didn't want to ruin anyone's life, she said. You already did. Silence. Then, just as I thought the conversation was over, she pulled something out of her coat pocket. A photograph. A small Polaroid of a boy, Maxime, sitting in a sandbox with a plastic dinosaur in one hand. He was looking at someone, smiling. His hair was tousled, his cheeks were full, and those eyes. Tell me, they're not yours, she said, and for the first time, her voice broke. I took the photo, stared at it for a long time, and felt something inside me break. Not grief, not anger, something worse. A terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, I still had something left to fight for. Do the test, I said, and then I stood up and walked away before I lost everything that was left of me.
The waiting almost killed me. It was 12 days. 12 long, nervous, exhausting days to get the results. During that time, I couldn't focus on anything. Couldn't work, couldn't sleep, couldn't even sit still long enough to finish a sandwich. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boy's face. His big eyes, his round cheeks, his laughter that I had only heard once, from a distance. I constantly asked myself questions that no one could answer. Did he like dinosaurs like I did at his age? Did he sleep on his side, like me? Did he cry at loud noises? Did he even know who I was? When the envelope finally arrived, I just stared at it for an hour. It was simple, white, and incredibly light. I don't know why I expected it to weigh more. Maybe because it contained my future, or at least the version of the future I had been quietly building in my head. The moment I opened it, I knew it would change something. I just didn't know what part of me would be left standing after. The result was positive, 99.9%. He was mine. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I would break down or laugh or throw something. But I didn't. I just sat on my kitchen floor, holding the truth I hadn't asked for, and wondered how long she had known. How long she had lived next to me, in our house, pregnant with my child, and kept it a secret. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I drove to her house. Dmitro opened the door. He didn't look surprised. That was the first thing that struck me. He looked resigned, as if he had been expecting this moment to come, like a train he couldn't stop. His eyes were dimmer than last time, less self-satisfied, more weary. His jaw was clenched, his hair was a mess, as if fatherhood wasn't the romantic dream that Instagram filters had promised. "She's not here," he said in an even voice. "Then you and I will talk," I replied. He didn't move, just leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. "I know." I blinked. "You know what?" "That he's yours," he said without even flinching. "I always knew." The silence after that was like a volcano. Something inside me broke, not violently, but finally, like a door closing forever. I couldn't understand what he was saying. I needed him to repeat it, explain it, admit that it wasn't real. But he didn't. He just kept talking. She told me before he was born that he might not be mine, but I didn't care. I told her I would raise him anyway, and if he looked like you, I would deal with it. You were irrelevant to me." I took a step forward, my fist trembling. Irrelevant? Me? The biological father? "Do you think biology makes you a dad?" he snapped. "Where were you when he had a fever at 3 in the morning? Where were you when he couldn't fall asleep unless someone sang him a lullaby? You think you can just come now and rewrite what's already been written? You stole him. She gave him to me." Those words hit me like ice in my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink, couldn't stand still. He wasn't raising my child by accident. He took him, knowing the truth, and she let him. "You could have told me," I said, my voice breaking. "You both could have." "We didn't owe you anything," he said coldly. "She left. You were no longer part of the picture." "But I should have been," I whispered. Dmytro looked me in the eye and said something I'll never forget. "Maybe you should have fought harder before she walked out the door." I turned and left. I don't remember how I got back to my car. I don't remember driving. I just remember realizing that the two of them had built a life on a lie and left me out of it, as if I were a threat. But now I had the truth, and the truth had weight. I was no longer just an ex-husband. I was someone's father, and I had a decision to make. I thought that knowing the truth would give me strength, as if the DNA results would unlock some righteous energy inside me. I thought I would print them out and attach them to some legal form and walk into court like a man with a purpose. But the truth doesn't come with instructions. It comes with weight, with fear, with an empty ache that makes you question whether you even deserve what you've just discovered. I didn't file anything. Not yet. Instead, I sat on that piece of paper as if it were radioactive, and every time I thought about doing something, my mind went back to the same question. What if he doesn't want to know me? Maria didn't call me after the park. Dmytro clearly wanted me to be erased. And the child, the real child at the center of this mess, he didn't even know I existed. That thought tortured me more than anything else. My son was growing up thinking someone else was his dad, while I sat on the sidelines eating my own heart to pieces. And yes, I know how pathetic that sounds. I don't like it either. But one morning, 3 weeks after that meeting on the bench, I made a decision. Maybe not the right one, certainly not a strong one, but the only one I could live with. I wrote a letter. A real, handwritten one. No raccoons, no typing, just me, ink, and every drop of nerve I had left. It wasn't dramatic, no threats, no legal jargon, just honesty. I told her I wasn't coming to ruin anything. I just wanted to meet him once. No expectations, no pressure, just a conversation. A moment. A window. She replied 2 days later. One line. Saturday, 11 a.m., at the park. Come alone. The moment I drove into that parking lot, I felt like I was crossing the border of my own dream. The sun was shining, mocking me with its cheerfulness. Families were scattered on the grass, children on swings, parents with coffee and strained smiles. I parked far from the playground and walked with slow, hesitant steps, scanning faces. And then I saw them. Maria was sitting under a tree, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked smaller than I remembered her. Next to her on the grass sat a boy with a red toy truck in one hand and juice in the other. Maxim, my son. He didn't look up as I approached. Maria did. No waving, no smiling, just a meager nod. I squatted next to them, not too close, my heart pounding in places where I didn't think I had a rhythm. "Hi," I said quietly. Maxim looked up. Big blue eyes, my eyes. "Who's that?" he asked Maria. She hesitated. He's an old friend. Your friend? He asked her, then looking straight at me for the first time, he added, You don't look like a friend. You look like a stranger. That word hit me in the throat. Stranger. That's exactly what I was. A stranger to my own blood. I forced a smile. Well, yeah, I guess so. Do you have trucks? He pointed to the one in his hand. I did. Not as cool as that one. He looked me over, 3 seconds of absolute silence, then returned to his juice. Maria didn't speak, and neither did I. We just sat there, 3 broken people, arranged like a mistake no one wanted to claim. I watched him play, for 20 minutes, asked him 2 questions, got 3 answers. At one point, he looked up and said, Your shoelace is weird. And that was the most direct connection we had. Then Maria stood up, dusted off her jeans, and said, Okay, time to go. I didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded and slowly stood up. As she was gathering his things, I squatted next to him again and whispered, Maybe I'll see you again, buddy. He didn't answer, but as they walked away, right before they turned the corner, he shouted one word, Bye, stranger! I stood there frozen. That word again. Stranger. It echoed in my chest like a door closing. I had met my son and was no more than a guest in his story. A week passed after that morning in the park. I couldn't stop hearing that word. Stranger. I heard it in my sleep, in the whistling of the kettle, in the gaps between my thoughts. He didn't mean to be cruel. He was just a child calling things by their names. And the truth was, he wasn't wrong. I was a stranger, a ghost who had entered his sunny world and left a shadow on the grass. But even ghosts remember what sunlight feels like. I didn't contact her right away. I told myself not to pressure her, to let her breathe, to let him breathe. I convinced myself that the moment I had, 20 minutes of watching him roll toy wheels in the dirt, should be enough. But grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it just sits in your chest, quiet and heavy, and waits. And then, 4 days later, my phone vibrated. Maria. One line. Maxim keeps asking when the man with the weird shoelace is coming. I reread it again and again, thinking maybe I misunderstood something. But no, it was my invitation, or at least a crack. We tried again. The same park, a different place. I brought him a toy fire truck, red, with working sirens. He lit up when he saw it. Not necessarily because of me, but because of the fire truck. And that was enough. He asked me what real fire trucks sounded like. I made some silly, overly exaggerated sound, and he laughed so hard he dropped his juice on the grass. The second meeting lasted an hour. The third, almost 2. At the fourth, he started calling me Fire Truck Guy. I accepted it. I held on to that nickname as if it were something sacred, because in a way, it was. I was no longer a stranger. I was part of his vocabulary, his memory, his Saturday. It was more than I had a right to expect. Dimitro didn't like it. I saw it on his face one day when he came to pick up Maxim. We didn't talk. We just nodded, politely, carefully, like 2 men holding opposite ends of a very fragile thread. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, maybe even fear. But I didn't come for revenge. I didn't want to destroy his role. I just wanted my own. And strangely, Maria understood that. She started inviting me not just to the park, to playgrounds, to parties, to the science museum. Maxim liked rockets. He liked ketchup on everything. He hated loud toilets and loved bubble wrap.